we got one more section to go through here, which is virtual private networks. So the point of a virtual private network is to connect to something like your workplace over the internet and to create a virtual network that should be as secure as a dedicated leased line like a T1. So you do this with encryption, of course. So SLIP was the first one, a layer 2 protocol. This will connect you to a device at the other end, but it did not have any encryption, no confidentiality, integrity, or authentication. It would just make it possible to connect to a remote network remotely over the internet. Now, point-to-point protocol added some authentication to it. This replaced it. And then PPTP, point-to-point tunneling protocol, was the default VPN protocol for Windows for a really long time. I think they just finally deprecated it a few weeks ago, where they're not going to include it in modern versions of Windows. It passes PPP bar IP and uses TCP port 1723. It has encryption, but it's an old technique of encryption. It's pretty easy to hack. L2TP was a tunneling protocol, I think originally from Cisco, and this again did not provide confidentiality. It didn't have any encryption. It just connected two networks together over the internet. You could use L2TP together with IPsec, and that's considered a very strong way to make a VPN. A lot of them work that way. IPsec is the encryption part of IP version 6, and we talked about it before. It has the ESP mode and the AH mode. One thing that's screwy about it is it uses special layer 4 protocols that are not TCP or UDP, so you often have trouble getting these through a home router that only knows about TCP and UDP. So you can do host to gateway or gateway to gateway, point to point, or host to host, various modes of IPsec architecture. And so the original packet looks like this. Transport mode just sends some data inside it. Tunnel mode takes the entire packet and gives it a new header, encapsulating the packet with another packet. So SSL was the original way to make HTTP connections secure. It's now deprecated, replaced by TLS, which is what we're using for HTTP connections, HTTPS connections on port 443. And TLS VPNs do seem to be the wave of the future, rather than having some goofy port or protocol just connect over HTTPS. All right. Anyway, remote access is where you control a device remotely. The old way to do it was ISDN. You'd have copper wire phone lines to give you an internet connection or some kind of remote controller device. Basic rate interface was the cheapest one. Primary race interface was bigger, sort of like a T1. DSL, digital subscriber line, is the way you, of course, get internet. If you're far from a phone, close to a phone switching station, it can be fast. The problem is it degrades with the distance, so your quality of your service will depend on how close you are to a major switching center, a phone switch. So you can, if you're within 1.5, let's see, if you're up to 18,000 feet, you might get only 16 kilobits per second. But if you're down within 5,000 feet, you'll get megabits per second out of it. So cable modems let you send your data over broadband cable TV through coaxial cables. You're only going to get it where there is cable TV, so therefore only in cities, not in the country, but it's high bandwidth, and it doesn't matter how far you go, because the cable is a waveguide that efficiently delivers the signals over long distances. Callback is an old technique where you would call to say, I want to talk to the server, then you hang up, and the server calls you back at the known phone number, so that would prevent somebody else from getting in. It's pretty clever for security. But it would only work if your number is always fixed. Caller ID would verify using caller ID to make sure that you are the expected person calling in, but caller ID can easily be forged. It's not a very reliable way to identify who's actually calling. So remote desktop, RLogin, and RSH are old Unix access systems, clear text and poorly authenticated, like Telnet. Modern access protocol is VNC is one and RDP is another. This is the default one Microsoft Windows uses to control Windows desktops, and VNC is the open source way to get a graphic image of a desktop. It's much inferior, but open source. Go to My PC and LogMeIn or other services that use a tunnel over HTTPS. You're connecting to a central server and authenticating to it, and it then forwards you to the computer that you're trying to control. Virtual desktop infrastructure is where you don't really have a computer. You just have a thin client, and you're connected to a virtual server. This is, I think, effectively what I'm using for my consulting mostly. They give me a virtual machine on Azure, controlled by the company, and I connect with a client. So I never actually have any company data on my machine. I'm just viewing it on a remote cloud machine. You can also have one that just virtualizes an application. There's a server running some application, and you just access the application on the server. I've got this. I can connect to like Outlook at a client's server without completely logging into the server and getting a whole desktop. I just get the one application, Outlook. And again, therefore, you have total control of the data, total control of the versions and patches, because they're not actually running software on this uncontrolled end user machine. It's all just running on a server in the cloud under the control of the company. Let me check for comments here. Nothing new, okay? All right. Screen scraping is what VNC uses. It takes images from the screen and packetizes them and sends them across. And like I say, that's why when you use VNC, you tend to get incomplete images of the desktop. Instant messaging is just real-time chat over the internet with audio and video. IRC was the old way to do it, running on Unix servers. Now it's pretty much all taken over by malware and malicious content. AOL Instant Messenger was big decades ago. ICQ also, which I think just finally went away. Jabber XMPP is the protocol used for this. These all tended to be insecure because people had unpatched old chat clients, and you can use them to do things like file sharing. So these things were considered pretty sleazy and unsafe, but they were very popular decades ago. There's remote meeting technology, GoToMeeting by Citrix, Microsoft Office Live Meeting. These allow you to share things over the internet. Now I think Zoom and Citrix's WeChat or something. Citrix has an equivalent of Zoom. I use it and I hate it. WebEx. WebEx is the enterprise version of Zoom run by Cisco that's much inferior in practice to Zoom, but it has more management features, so most companies require you to use WebEx, even though it's much harder and much less reliable than Zoom. Anyway, all right. These might let you control a PC. You might be able to send files and so on. Personal digital assistants, I don't know if anybody uses these anymore now that we have smartphones, but they used to have these things which would do computing that you carry around that were not a phone also. Like most of them just converged with smartphones. In principle, you could lose data because the device gets stolen, so it should be encrypted and have a remote wipe and a PIN code to lock it. Nowadays, you have smartphones, and the smartphone has a mobile device management system if you use it at a company, so the company can remote wipe and they can monitor it to see if you're putting on forbidden apps. I put TikTok on my phone, and one of my clients busted me and said, you cannot have TikTok on your phone because it's forbidden to have TikTok on government or big corporation phones mostly these days, so I had to take it off. And they can detect what I have on my phone and decide if they like it. All right. And so you should use secure wireless connections. Is a good practice. All right. Wireless application protocol is one way to provide secure web services to handheld devices. This includes a thing called a handheld device markup language and wireless transport layer security. I don't think I've ever used it. I don't think any popular service provides this that you would normally use. WAP is another one. You have a WAP browser, a micro browser, which connects to a WAP gateway to access sites written in wireless markup language based on XML. It's disappeared, that's why. Okay, it was in your book, but that's why I've never used it. I think these things are extinct. Content delivery networks, I use this all the time. I use Cloudflare, which is a content delivery network. So you are not connecting directly to my website. You're looking at a copy of my website on a content delivery machine. So you get improved performance and lower latency and more secure experiences. Akamai, Amazon CloudFront, Cloudflare, Microsoft Azure can do this. This is a very good idea. It protects your server and it adds bandwidth and gives customers a better experience because they connect to an image of the site nearer them. All right. Let's take a look at the 4J, which is here. All right. All right. All right, so which protocol gives transport but no encryption? Layer 2 tunneling protocol. It delivers the traffic but doesn't encrypt it. All right, which one is old and unsafe? Yep, PPTP, Microsoft's encrypted protocol, but it hasn't been safe in a long time. It's been Microsoft's default until very recently. All right, which one runs over port 3389? Yep, that's RDP. All right. Microsoft's remote desktop protocol to control Windows servers. All right, which IM system has been used since the 1980s? I think it was the first one. Internet Relay Chat, old-fashioned text-only protocol for Unix servers. Somebody changed their name or joined late, anyway.